Hello and welcome to a new vlog and video in cooperation with ReiseJung. We're taking a look at the first 2 days on board of the river Sapphire, the ship that I showed to you in my last video. We are traveling on this beautiful ship for 1 week on the Danube. We're starting in Passau. We got there with our coaches. My coach started in Hanau. We had 2 other coaches, one starting in Maintal and the other one in Bruchköbel. And now we're heading to Passau. We all met at a fuel stop and then we continued on. Here we are crossing the Danube for the first time, here for the second time. Now we're slowly approaching Passau. Here we are already leaving the highway and then we are boarding our beautiful ship, which was docked in 2nd row today. After all guests were on board, we immediately left Passau as there is a lock coming up soon and almost all ships are leaving at the same time, so it can be a big advantage to be a little bit faster than the other ones. So we are now leaving Passau, sailing past the Feste Oberhaus and the confluence of the river Inn and Ilz and Danube, during perfect weather. A lot of our guests were skeptical about the weather with cruise in end of October, but we were extremely lucky. We were traveling during Indian summer on the Danube. We had fantastic weather. As you can see, the leaves were shining in all colors, so it was very, very beautiful, and we chose the perfect week for our cruise on the Danube. And now it's time to take a look at my beautiful cabin. It's cabin 337, the last cabin on the upper deck. But it's not a problem at all on this ship because it's a twin cruiser and therefore it's quite calm even in the last cabin. Of course you can hear a little bit from the engine, you feel a little bit of vibrations, but it's much less than on any other cruise ship I've been on before. I really like the cabins, even though they are not the most modern anymore. They have a lot of storage space. We have a proper fridge. We have also a proper desk with additional storage space on both sides. And of course we have a French balcony. Also the bed is very, very comfortable. We have nightstands on both sides, power socket on one side. And also the bathroom is very smart. We have a lot of space in a proper shower, not with a curtain, but with glass doors. And we have also a lot of storage space. And what's quite important to know is a lot of guests don't realize that in the beginning, the mirror also has storage space behind it. In the meantime, we've already reached the castle Krempelstein, which we can see here in the background. And once again, we can see the beautiful colors. And here we are reaching the lock Jochenstein that I already mentioned before. If there are many ships in Passau, this lock can cause a lot of delays. Even though it's a pretty big lock that can take up to 4 ships in each of their 2 chambers, it still can cause a bit of delay. We then sailed past the Rock Jochenstein and then we're reaching Engelhartszell, which is also a quite important cruise destination. A lot of ships are starting here so they can save the waiting time in front of the lock Jochenstein. Meanwhile, we had a nice sunset and then it was time for dinner. As we already knew from the Monarch Countess, for example, the ships of the Starling Fleet Shipping Company are offering fantastic food on board, and also on the River Sapphire the food was amazing. We then spent the first evening in the panoramic lounge. Of course it was already dark outside and very late in the evening we sailed past the city of Linz. Linz will be a destination at the end of the cruise, so we will spend a full day here in this beautiful city, so we will see a lot more from Linz later on in one of the next videos. And the next morning when I woke up, it was a beautiful sunrise. It was typical weather for autumn on the Danube. We had fog above the river. The sun was starting to shine. It was a beautiful morning. I really love mornings like this, and you cannot get something like this in spring or in summer. To see something like this, you have to travel in autumn. It was a wonderful morning and we were already at the end of the Wachau shortly before our first destination in Krems. Here we are in Krems and here we can see the Swiss Crown, a river cruise ship that we are traveling on next year 3 times. We have 3 cruises on this beautiful ship, including our New Year's cruise. Those cruises will be open for booking soon. And here we are docked in 2nd row next to the Compass Empress, and whilst some of our guests were doing a city tour, we took a coach to Langenlois, which is not too far away, and it's one of the wine capitals of Austria in the Kamp Valley. And here we are visiting a very special place. It's called Loisium Weinwelt. meaning Wine World. There we're gonna learn a lot about wine. In this modern cube house you can taste and buy wines, but the more interesting part is below, because below the whole city of Langenlois there are wine cellars, and we're gonna see a few of them during our tour, and we're gonna learn a lot about wine. So after a short walk through the vineyards we are now heading underground. And after taking a lift down, we're now in this tank, and there we got a light and water show that was pretty amazing and looking very, very nice. It was also quite smart because it's separating groups, although it didn't work today because there were two Asian groups that seemed to book an express tour. They were almost running through the Weinwelt, but our group had of course more time, so we let them pass us, and then we continued in our slow pace with a lot of interesting and fun explanations about wine. And it's made quite nicely. You start learning how wine was done earlier on, you learn a lot about the history, then you're coming back up and suddenly you're in the city center and you're gonna see the former house of the winemaker family. You're gonna see how they lived in the past, and then you're heading back down in the cellars and you're gonna see how the wine is made nowadays. It's basically an underground factory that's very, very interesting. So I can highly recommend visiting the Loisium Weinwelt when you're in Austria. We're now slowly getting to the end of the tour, and at the end you're gonna see the most spectacular rooms. First you're gonna see the active rooms that are still used for the wines of the company Steininger. And then you're gonna get to this amazing room. It almost feels like you're in a cathedral. It's pretty big, and through this, let's call it chimney, you're gonna see how far below the ground you actually are. And then we're getting into this amazing mirror room, and then we're back at the cube house. And of course that's not the end of the tour, because obviously we're gonna have a wine tasting at the end, and then you have the chance to buy a few wines if you want. And it's also possible to buy wines from other winemakers of Langenlois. We then headed back to Krems and back on board, and as soon as everybody was on board we were already leaving Krems, continuing on to Vienna, our next destination. On board it was time for lunch. Lunch was a buffet. We were a bit skeptical in the beginning because usually we have served lunch, but on this ship it is a buffet, and we once had a ship where it didn't work very well with the buffet. Food was not very good, but here on the river Sapphire it worked perfectly fine. The food was still hot, it was tasty, so it was also nice with the buffet, and of course it saves a lot of time. We then passed the Lok Altenwörth and sailed past the former power plant of Zwentendorf that never went into service, and then we met an old friend, the Charles Dickens, the cruise ship that we had last season for our winter cruises on the Rhine. She was now on the Danube as well. And sailing on the Danube is quite different to sailing on the Rhine because there are much less ships. There are almost no freight ships at all. So sometimes you're sailing completely on your own on the extremely wide river. And if you're gonna have a sunset like this, it's just fantastic and just so beautiful. We're now heading to Vienna, our evening destination, where we arrived during dinner. Here we are reaching the last lock, Lok Greifenstein, and after that we are docking at Vienna. Handelskai. There are two docking locations in Vienna. You can dock at Nussdorf or at Handelskai. If you want to dock at Handelskai, you have to pay a lot extra, but it's worth it because you're much closer to the city center and you can reach the city center with the underground instead of taking a very long tram ride from Nussdorf. And here we are docked in second row, and whilst some of our guests are now heading to the so-called Heurigen and a light tour, we headed to the famous Prater, the amusement park, which is not too far away from our docking location. We could even walk there, and of course I wanted to take a ride on the new roller coaster Wiener Looping, which opened this year, and it was of course a lot of fun, but there are also a lot of older coasters which are also very, very nice, like the Gesenkte Sau. And in general I can highly recommend going to the Prater when it's dark outside, because it's just so beautiful with all those lights. It's a very impressive place to go during darkness. And even in the off season there are still a lot of rides operational in the evening, just like the Ferris wheel, not the famous one. the Wiener Riesenrad. This is the famous Ferris wheel which we just saw in the background. We will see it again in a second. Of course you can also take this one, but we decided to take the other one, the open one, because there you can take some very nice pictures. It was already almost 11 in the evening, so most rides were closed in the meantime, but the Ferris wheel was still operational. So we took a last ride on it and then we headed back to our ship. Here we can see the Danube city, the modern part of Vienna with the skyscrapers, and here we can see the Ferris wheel itself. And of course you also have a fantastic view over the city center of Vienna. And here we can see the Wiener Riesenrad in the background. But now it's time to head back to our beautiful river Sapphire. As most people were now slowly leaving the Prater, we were also heading back home to our river Sapphire. And this is the beautiful view from my cabin, from my French balcony. And that's it for the first 2 days on board. Of course, in the next video we will see the next days. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link. Here you can see when our next video will be uploaded, the name of the song, and maybe I'll meet you one day at one of our cruises. In the video description you can find a link to ReiseJung.